My son's name is Nicholas Vasilios Samoras. He joined the Navy in 1980, and he was in for 7 years. He was discharged in 1987.
So your son went in when he was 18, and after 7 years he would be 25.
Correct.
What were some of the main changes that you saw in him, maybe when he was in the Navy and then when the time that he left? What were some of like the main differences you saw?
The changes I saw were in his letters. He was maturing. He was seeing a lot of things that really made him think. Because, you know, most kids at, say, age 17 and out of high school have one outlook. But the Navy, you know, we were a little disappointed when he wanted to go in the Navy. We wanted him to go to college. But when that's what he wanted to do. I'm so happy that he did, because in looking at it now, it was the best thing for him. It was the best school or college he could have had for him as an individual.
What other emotions were you feeling when he told you that he wanted to go into the Navy?
Well, we were, as parents, with a 17-and-a-half-year-old, you know, we really were a little disappointed. We tried to talk him out of it, because he had quite an artistic ability. And the Art Institute in Chicago had a lot of places that things that he could, but he wasn't interested in that either. He had Navy in his mind, and that's what he did. And of course, we went along with it. That's what he wanted to do. And he was happy. He was very happy. Made a lot of good friends. People, a few that he still keeps in touch with now.
How much contact were you able to have with him in his 7 years in the Navy?
Oh, quite a bit. We received letters. And in fact, he was able on one tour, they were near Greece, so they stopped in Greece, in Piraeus. And he was able to go and see his grandparents, which were very close to Piraeus there, which was a nice thing for him. And he remembers walking down the street in his actually, they didn't want them to wear uniforms when they were off the ship. But he went and found Grandpa and Grandma and aunts and uncles and spent, well, actually just a few hours there, not that long. But that was a nice thing for him. He saw so much, so many places that really, and I see him now, he's just quite a matured man. The Navy was the best thing for him.
When he came back after the 7 years after he was discharged, what were some of your feelings when you were able to finally kind of breathe a sigh of relief and say, well, he's finally back? What was that like?
Relief and pride. I was really proud of him. He proved us wrong. He did very well, and he's still doing well. He has a nice family now, and he has a farm, and he loves animals, and he's up in Chesapeake Bay now, Maryland. And of course we talk to him all the time, and he's got 4 beautiful daughters and grandchildren, and we also have great-grandchildren, so we've been very blessed.
My name is Argieris Drosos. Here they call me Arthur. I was in the United States Army. My rank when I left was Specialist 3rd Class, Spec 3 they call. I was drafted in April 18th, 1956, and they took me to the basic training at Fort Dix, New Jersey. From there, I went to school at Fort Gordon, Georgia, where they had the United States Army Signal Corps School. I stayed there for 2-3 months, and when I graduated, there were 8 of us, and they sent us to Fort Huachuca, Arizona, down here in south of Tucson, by Sierra Vista, to be instructors, to teach other recruits the communications equipment.
Take me back to when you were drafted and those early times through basic training. What was your reaction when you were drafted, and then what was basic training like?
Well, it was just it was rough because I really wasn't used to the military type of life. You know, first of all they shave your hair, and then you gotta do all these exercises and training day and night for 2-3 months in Fort Dix, New Jersey, and it wasn't easy, but I made it through.
I guess besides that, how did you guys kind of entertain yourself off of the base, like away from it? How did what did you guys do?
There wasn't much to do. Sierra Vista at that time was 1,500 people. Right now it's about 75,000 people. but back then it was a very small town. There wasn't much to do except maybe just a bowling alley and to go to a restaurant. There wasn't much to do.
Were you a good bowler?
Yeah, I tried to be.
So now, in the days kind of after your service, when you look back at your time with the Army, what I guess stands out? What are some of your fondest memories?
The important thing was like in 1957, 1 year after I was in the service, I applied to become a citizen. And I applied at in Bisbee, Arizona, where they have the Superior Court courthouse. And I became citizen, and I had two of my sergeants come down there and stand up for me, and that was very important to me to become a United States citizen.
Is there still kind of a sense of pride, kind of every Veterans Day?
Yeah, I didn't go overseas to fight the wars, but I did my part here in the United States.
How did being in the United States Army kind of change and impact your life after you were done?
Well, they train you to be a man. When I went in, I was just a young guy, and when you get out, you become a man. You know how to salute, you know how to behave, you know how to say yes sir and no sir, and respect everybody. I want to thank the Army for bringing me to Arizona, because when I finished the Army after 2 years, I came here to Scottsdale, and I went to ASU, and I got my degree in 1965, but in the meantime, I met my wife there in around 1960, and we got married in 1962, and we had 3 kids, and we still have them here in town, Alexander, Christina, and Dean, and they have their own families now.
I was a third-class electrician's mate when I got out. I joined in February 1958. My dad had died in July 1st, 57. So I took boot camp at Great Lakes and electrician's mate A school, and I got orders to go to the USS Piedmont from electrician's mate A school.
You mentioned you were both on a submarine as well as on a regular ship. Can you kind of compare the main differences?
Yeah, it was a world of difference, because submarine was really small and very tight. And we went with a full battle crew on the med cruise, so we were hot bunking it. So I shared the bunk that I had with first class petty officer, second class petty officer, and me. So the first class got to sleep on the sheets, and the second class got the mattress cover, and I couldn't. Once I got into the rack, I couldn't turn over. I had to get out of the rack in order to turn over.
You mentioned traveling. You traveled a lot of places. What were some of the main ones that stood out?
Well, the first one was in the Pacific, so it was a Westpac cruise. Then when I got to the submarine, we went on a med cruise, came back to the States, and got on the USS Wasp and went back to the med. Never got into the Eastern Med. When I was on the submarine, I got a Navy MATS flight to Greece to visit relatives. And when I got extended by Kennedy, they sent our task force into the Baltic. We were the first task force in the Baltic after the Second World War, since the Second World War. We went into Kiel, Germany. That was interesting. I finally got to see a Russian fishing trawler. They have a whole canning factory on those ships. I thought it was a little fishing boat. It was not a little fishing boat.
All right. Anyway, tell me about
the first ship I was on, the Piedmont. When it was commissioned, Disney was asked to give the ship a mascot, and he used Doc of the Seven Dwarfs, and he's repairing a destroyer. So the Navy declared the Piedmont the only boy in the Navy. So we never referred to the ship as she or her. It was always Doc. And the camaraderie in there was pretty close, because there was a lot of competition at that time between ships of the same caliber, and we would compete for efficiency. And you'd wear that on an E on your right arm. And when I was on board, they had an E with 3 hash marks. And when I got off, I looked it up in the Navy Times, and the Piedmont had taken the gold E the five years in a row. My uncle was on the sister ship, the Dixie, during World War II. So that the camaraderie on the especially the electricians it was all repair, and sailors in salt waters will screw up anything, so we had a lot of work to do those days.
How did being in the Navy affect the rest of your life?
Oh, everything I got out of the Navy was a plus. At the time, the only thing I wanted out of the Navy was me. But now, after 4 years, everything I got out of the Navy was a plus. They gave me a vocation. I got to see 3/4 of the world. And now I'm getting my meds from the VA. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it just, the experience was fantastic.
How do you feel you changed from the time, I guess, how different of a person were you after those 4 years?
I was a kid when I joined it, and you grow up rather quickly in the Navy. The rest of the services are the same way. Most of the guys I hung around with in high school, most of them joined the Marines. That's the kind of neighborhood I came from in Chicago. But my brother and I were in the Navy, and this one other guy, and the 2 guys that went in the Army, one of them became an MP. So it shows you the kind of guys they grew up with. And I got together with them after the service. There were very few of us that didn't join. Some of the guys didn't go.
Have you kept in contact with anybody from?
I still go to the reunions of the Piedmont. It was the best ship I served on, and I still go. I just got word today that, matter of fact, the guy I went aboard with, Tom Smith, he pronounced it Smith. He just passed away, and we went on board at the same time in Kaohsiung, Formosa.
What are those reunions like?
They're great.
Joking.
They're great because we go to the reunions, and there are still plank sailors, the guys that actually put it into commission in 1943. Something I found out last year, the guys that took it out of commission and gave it to the Turkish Navy are also called plank sailors. I never knew that, but we've got half a dozen of them, and they're in their 80s, and they still make it back to the reunions. It's the kind of ship it was.
I started out to go into the Navy. The Navy recruiter who was to do the last test was not there on the appointed day. And the Marine Corps recruiter came in, and he asked the Navy recruiters what was the problem. And they told him, and he said, well, I can give her test. And I said, fine. That's how I got into the Marine Corps over the Navy.
From when to when did you serve?
I served from June of 1959 to February of 1960.
And what were your responsibilities? What was your job? What did you do?
Basically, I was a sales clerk. I went and worked in the, wasn't the commissary, but it was where the guys would come in with orders for office supplies, munitions, truck parts, whatever. I mean, the building was almost as big as the church property.
Okay.
And almost as wide as the church property.
Why did you decide to enlist?
Because I wanted to do something for my country.
Okay. What kind of pride did you get when you enlisted?
I was very prideful. Felt like buttons were popping.
Take me through the training process. and stuff?
Training, we took a train down from New York to Paris Island. And from where the train was, we took a bus onto the island. The women's training and barracks and things were about 1 mile to 1.5 miles away from the men's training areas. And believe me, we could hear the DIs yelling at the guys. We learned how to wear the uniform properly. We learned how to march. We were not allowed to handle, didn't have guns. In 1960, Uncle Sam did not want the ladies doing military stuff. We did go through the gas chamber, and yeah, that was really an experience that you don't want to do it a second time. We went through one time without and one time with the gas masks. I enjoyed the company of the ladies that we were with. It was a whole squadron. We had our own bunks and everything in our own areas. We had a sergeant who was in charge of us. Basically, at the word of attention, the mosquitoes and the gnats bit. But all in all, it was a very enlightening and what else? I don't want to say entertaining, but yeah, I was happy while I was there. Experience. I enjoyed it.
You mentioned it was an enlightening experience. How exactly was it?
Well, I learned so many new things. Things that I didn't think that I could do physically or even mentally or anything. And yeah, I was shown that yes, you can expand yourself if you put your mind to it.
Did you make any close friends while in the service? And,
Yes.
And did those kind of carry over after your service?
To a certain extent they did, and because I ended up marrying a Marine, and we went from Camp Lejeune, we stayed at Camp Lejeune for a while, and then we went out to, we went to Cherry Point, and to where else? We went to Fresno, and to different places like that. And that's after I started having the kids.
How did your service and experiences affect your life after you were done?
I was able to do more things because I had a lot more confidence in myself and knew that I could, if I really pushed it, stretch my parameters to engage in other occupations and things like that.
Do you have any specific examples of kind of stuff like that? You talked about how it enlightened you to be able to do things that you didn't think that you'd be able to do.
Well,
are there any
I
kind
was
of
able
examples?
to, even though my father was in construction and we moved a lot, I was more of a child of that. But through the military, I learned how to interact with all types of people and to be very careful about how to judge a person. You don't judge a person by their looks or their personality or their clothing. You have to talk to them and to a certain extent get to know them before making any type of a judgment. And even then, the one judgment that you make could be wrong.
I'm a Jim Hadzoglu, actually, Demosteni Hadzoglu. Everybody calls me Jim because it's so difficult. I served in the Air Force 1950 to 1954 during the Korean War. I was stationed in various places from Texas to Morocco to Tripoli, Libya.
Take me back to basic training. When
Yeah.
you first entered the Air Force, what was that like, and what were some of your biggest surprises?
My biggest surprise with basic training was when I arrived in Texas, Lackland Air Force Base, San Antonio. We arrived in the middle of the night. They said, stand by, the buses are coming to get you. There were about 800 of us, and 2 6-wide trucks showed up, and we all stood up for about 20 miles because there was no room in the truck to fall over. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning. We said, oh, we're going to get some rest now. Didn't happen. We had a breakfast of, I remember it clearly, pork chops and eggs. And we said, oh, we're going to bed now. No. We went and picked up our gear. They gave us clothing. They gave us shots. They gave us a shower. Now we're going to get some rest. No. We got to bed around 4 o'clock. Around 4:30, they woke us up. In a novel way, the sergeant walks in, takes an ash can, and throws it down the middle of the bay. Okay, you know, everybody out, get out there. What are we doing? We're going to get shots. This is 4 o'clock in the morning. They marched us around to the infirmary, which doesn't open until 8. And by the time the medics showed up, it was 10. So we've been up now several hours. We thought we were done. We weren't. We went for a hike. And this sort of thing went on and on. It's just, I think it's not to break your spirit, but to alert you to the fact that this isn't going to be easy. It was very uncomfortable. Oh, I was very close with my family. I wrote regularly. I wrote so regularly that once in transit I couldn't write. They actually thought something happened to me. They contacted the Red Cross. The Red Cross contacted the chaplain who gave me a reading. How come you're not writing to your parents? I made the mistake of writing regularly, so I stopped once. My parents got all excited. They contacted the Red Cross, whatever. But anyway, they took it very well. My mother took it very hard. Matter of fact, I considered re-enlisting. It wasn't a bad life at the time, but my mother never would have made it. I decided against it, which was a good move. You want a family, wife, kids, whatever. Being in the military is tough, career-wise. But other than that, that's my story.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel like you changed as a man from the time that you left?
I grew up in a hurry. You grew up in a hurry. They kid you when you get there. Your sergeants during basic tell you, you have to fix your bed. Your mommy isn't here now. You got to do this, and your mommy isn't here now. And that's the case. A lot of guys were, the first night, a couple of nights, you could hear a lot of sobbing going on. I mean, these are 18, 19 years old, maybe younger. First time away from home. You know, having basically a shift for themselves. Went from mama's boy to, hey, you come here, you know, that type of thing. So that's the tough part, but you get over it. You come back different. You come back, I say a man. If you went in as a boy, you came back as a man.
Harry Cantarzi, Army, PFC.
Okay.
And I was airborne.
Okay. Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I requested draft.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess take me through the early stages of when you found out you were going and going through basic training. What were some of your early impressions of the Army?
When I first went in, my brother and I both. My brother got drafted, and I thought, well, it'd be great to go together. So I requested draft. He was 4F, I was 1A. So then I got to thinking, well, I'll wait till, because usually they draft you around 23 to 25 at that time. And so I thought, why should I wait around 4 or 5 years yet? And then maybe be married, maybe planning something. So I went in. And the first impression, I thought some of it was rather stupid as to, what they had us do. Like, we had a strip of linoleum in our barracks. You weren't allowed to walk on it. So if you wanted to go from this side to that side, you had to jump over it. You couldn't walk on it. And then if you did something wrong, we had coal stoves at that time. They'd make you take all the coal out, dust them off, then set them down, and then paint the inside white, and then dust them off, so put them all back. And this is just discipline, because the biggest thing, of course, in the military is when somebody gives you a command, you don't say, what? What'd you say? No, because usually, what did you say? You're dead. You got to respond to what they tell you, not question what they're telling you. And that's the first thing, that impression I had was the first 20 days in the service.
What were some of your favorite experiences from your time in the Army?
Well, it's just the camaraderie of the guys. I mean, you make friendships there that you don't make out, especially I was 19 when I went in. And so consequently, most of the gentlemen that I was in with were past 21, 22. There was some 19, even had some 17. But you get to make some hard friends because, like then we went to the airborne at Fort Bragg and you're getting ready to jump out of a plane. I got a funny experience I got to tell you. We had a 34-foot platform. You jumped off in a harness and you land. Then they had a 12-foot platform. You would just jump off. Well, I was chewing gum this one morning. So the sergeant says to me, "Are you chewing gum?" And I says, "Yeah." He says, "Well, take it off and put it on your helmet." So I'm sitting there thinking to myself, is this nuts or what? I'm getting ready to jump out of a plane, for no good reason. It's a good plane, and I'm going to jump out. And I'm over here. I thought of it when I was in school. Remember they'd put a circle on the board, then you put your nose in the middle of the circle because you were chewing gum and stuff. And I started laughing. Well, 120 push-ups later, I was still laughing. And he says to me, "What are you laughing at, Greek?" Because everybody, once they find out you're Greek, that's all they call you. And I said, "Sarge, did you look in the mirror?" Well, that cost me another 20 push-ups.
You went in when you were 19. You left when you were 21.
Yeah.
What do you think changed about yourself in those 2 years? How did the Army change you?
I would not trade those 2 years for anything. I think every young man should automatically go into the military for at least a year or two. Get you away from mom and dad. You're not looking, Dad, I need money, I need this. You got to make your. And when I went in, you know what I was making? As a corporal, with jump pay, which is $55 extra, I was getting $154 a month was my pay. And so there's not a whole lot of money there. I feel sorry for the married guys. That's one of the reasons I went in. We had married guys, 3 kids at home, and they had $90 is what they had to divide. When they were done, they had $15. You know what they'd do? They'd pull KP just to. But growing up is a big thing. You go in a boy and you come out a man. I mean, when I went in at 19, I was back at 22. Everybody at our church thought I was older than my brother George, who was 4F and was 3 years older than I was. Because of the maturity that I had compared to the maturity he had at that same point.
Do you still keep in contact with some people from your...
Yes, I talk. Whenever I get to the town where I know I have friends, I look them up on the internet now. And
What are those kind of meetings like when you?
it's like we never, we're just like when I went home for the 100-year anniversary of our church. I mean, there's friends there that I've known my whole and hadn't seen them since I left 27 years ago to come out here. And yet it seemed like the other day we were doing something together. Memories and friendships like that you don't forget.
George Symbols. I was in the U.S. Navy, and my final rank was Seaman First Class.
Okay. What was your job and why did you choose the Navy and what was your job throughout the war?
I have a brother 2 years older than me, and he joined the Navy, and I just thought I'd follow him.
What did you do in the Navy?
Well, I had an awful lot of training. I finally wound up going to signal school, and I became a signalman on, the Navy furnished the radio men, the signalmen, and the gunnery people on merchant ships. And I elected for the merchant marine because I'd heard they had better.
What were some of the things that you guys would do on leave when you and the guys were kind of going out and hanging out? What were some things you guys liked to do on your time, maybe away from the Navy?
Well, head for a bar. Even though I was 17, and when I was discharged, I guess 1946, I would turn, in 46, December, I would turn 21. So I was 20 when I got discharged. But all of that time, we could go into any bar, any city, save one, and no problem getting served. The only place that was really tough, would you believe, was my hometown, Detroit.
Why is that?
I don't know, I for the life of me, but we'd go into a bar and hopefully, and oftentimes we'd meet some girls. Sometimes there was a dance coming up and, you know, they would invite you to join them in a forthcoming dance or things like that. In the city of Milwaukee, there was nothing like those people. Milwaukee is, I don't know, a couple of 100 miles from Great Lakes where we were in boot camp. There were people waiting for that train to come from the boot camp. These people had parties and they wanted to entertain sailors. So they would take you from the train to their homes. Then you'd have a night of drinking and dancing, having fun, and then they'd take you back to the train later. I'm extremely proud of my brother, who was a night fighter pilot in the Navy. In the Battle of Okinawa, he shot down 3 Japanese bombers. By that time, the Japanese planes were kamikaze, and he was a night fighter pilot, so he was one of the first people that were up there when that huge armada was making the invasion in Okinawa. And there were several admirals that saw what my brother was doing, and when he got back on ship, he got a lot of thank yous from those people.
I see here that you were in the Army from 1945 to 1948. Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I enlisted.
Why did you decide to enlist?
And when I wasn't quite 17, I decided if I was going to get an education, I needed to go in the Army to get the GI Bill. So I went into the recruiter, and she knew I wasn't 17 yet, but she snuck me in anyway. And I went to Fort Douglas, Utah for the, I can't remember what they call it anyway, the indoctrination into the Army. And I went to Fort Worth, Washington for 6 weeks for basic training, and then took to California, and there wasn't planes to fly the soldiers overseas. You went on a ship, you know, and there was so many people on that ship that they actually slept in shifts. You know, the shift that would sleep and the other would be working, and wherever they did, and so it just not a fun thing. And when that troop ship steamed into Tokyo Bay at 4 o'clock in the morning, I said, what am I doing here? You know, the farm wasn't that bad. But then again, I told myself, be quiet because you're going to get an education. And I did. That's where I was able to get my GED, which that gave me a slip that said I passed high school, you know. So, but then again, I had 3 years before I could do anything other than just the Army. I don't know why actually I joined the Army. When we were indoctrinated in, those guys there that were going to the Navy, and some of them Coast Guard, and I don't know, in the Army just, you might, actually, it was a cavalry unit. And of course, being a horseman, I took that, but there was no horses in my a lot of hard work, but I made up my mind I was going to excel and do my best, I was assigned to the prison at Sagamo Prison, which were all of the war criminals that fought the war. These were all people that committed atrocities. And I look back and think, how many 17-year-old kids could take on that much responsibility? And I thought, it's because I learned to work and I learned discipline. And there was so much in cell block 6, there was a lot of unrest. The prisoners were complaining all the time. And when I went in, these guys were actually, they were committing atrocities. So these guys, they smoked American cigarettes, which I didn't smoke, but they would come in and blow smoke in their cell, and it just, and I thought, that's inhuman treatment. And then again, people would say, well, they were criminals, look what they did. Well, does it make me any better than them to see what they were doing? And I always, every month I won the award for the best run cell block because I wouldn't stand for any of that.
Okay, well, my name is William Dennis Ypsilanti, and I was in the United States Navy. Actually, I started off in the Naval Reserve and was active duty for almost the entire 4 years, 10 months, and 19 days that I was in. I was an E5 when I got out.
Where were some of the places that the Navy took you, and what were some one or two that kind of stood out to you?
Well, that's a good question. Every place I went to, I found something of interest, something I didn't know before. For instance, when I went back to electronics school, I got to go to a Can-Am race, which is a road race in Plymouth, Wisconsin. I've never been to Wisconsin before, other than going to Milwaukee for a beer. But being out there in the woods, there's nothing there, Matter of fact, the place was so packed with people for this race. Me and this guy from Baltimore, we went to a hotel just to get a room. We had nothing. We had $14 between us. We walked into the lobby of the hotel about midnight. There's a sign at the desk that says, "No vacancies." Well, we looked around. There was nobody in the lobby. So we sat down on the couches and slept till 7 o'clock in the morning. And we were not bothered. We got up at 7 o'clock in the morning, woke up, we walked out into the street and went for breakfast. Other places I went to, when I was on the ship, we went to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. That was very interesting. I was actually the first time I was out of the country, out of the United States. And we stopped in North Carolina, Camp Lejeune, and we picked up 450 or 500 Marines who were going to be deployed to Vietnam, but they were going to spend a 6-month training in Guantanamo. And that was interesting. I took some pictures down there. Very barren area. And on one side was the United States, and the other side was Castro's Cuba. And after that, we went to Boston for ship overhaul, and I got to see some of the most fantastic scenes at sea. There was an instance where the ship, they blew the whistle for revelry, and everybody, oh geez, 6 o'clock already, and all of a sudden, go bang! And everybody was up going, what the hell was that? What was that? And but what it was the ship we were in the middle of a storm off of Cape Hatteras. And right after that big bang, there was an announcement. Now hear this, all hands are to stay clear of weather decks. Weather deck is something that's outside the ship, that can be swept over the side. I said, hey, Tony, what does it look like out there when they say that? He says, I don't know, I'm going to find out. Well, I climbed the ladder, I opened up the hatch, I look out and I say, oh, that doesn't look bad, everything's great. And all of a sudden the gray started turning foamy. And I realized I was at the bottom of a wave. Yeah, bottom of a wave. And then all of a sudden it started going, it started getting foamy again. And it was about 30 to 40 foot waves. And that ship was going down and up and down and up. That was really fascinating.
How do you feel like the Navy changed you as a person in terms of the person? How was the person that came out different than the person who entered?
It gave me an insight as to what my capabilities were. When I got out of the Navy, a friend of mine who I went to college with hooked me up with a fellow, his cousin, who worked at the phone company. And I was able to, because I had that experience in the service, working with lines and stuff like that, to work in the phone company, and it gave me the impetus to go ahead and pursue more knowledge about electronics. Very positive experience. I got to learn a lot of things about different people that wouldn't have learned if I'd stayed in New York. I have friends all over the world.
Okay, my name is Bill St. Armore. I don't use the William, I don't like it, too formal. I served first in the Navy, second in the Army, and third in the Air Force.
So you initially enlisted in May of 1960,
Right.
and then you re-enlisted 2 different times in the mid-70s. I guess why did you originally enlist, and then what made you come back and move to different branches?
You're going to find this funny. I don't know about the rest of the United States, but in the Northeast, where I came from, it was a normal progression. When you got out of high school, you went in the military, you served your time, possibly learned a good skill, earned your GI Bill, went to college, married a nice gal, used your GI Bill to buy a house, and that was progression. The Air Force, I think, was the best of all 3. If I could do it again, I would have probably gone into the Air Force first. Better living conditions, better schooling, and it's much better to travel by airplane than it is by truck or ship. Okay, I had been through Hawaii 38 times, through most of the world. We did about 7 million miles. I was in MAC, Military Airlift Command. I started out as just a load master, tell them how to load the airplane, what goes where, figure the weight and balance. Then I went to, when I became a higher rank, I was the training officer, training the whole squadron in air cargo and the aircraft and so on. I went in the Navy because I thought it'd be a good thing to start with, not knowing that I'd go on to the Army and to the Air Force, and I liked it very much. I went in the Navy primarily to get out of a really bad neighborhood I was raised in. I would have probably ended up in jail or prison if I had stayed there. So I went in to get away.
You mentioned that you went 7 million miles, you went to Hawaii 38 times. What kind of places really stood out to you?
Korea, Japan, the Philippines. We did a mid-air refueling 30-hour trip from California to Australia. Most of the time was spent flying because we were a flying outfit. What amazed me the most is we'd send an airplane out with 50 pounds on it. And I was used to working in civilian life for profit, for air cargo. We had to fill that airplane up to make money. It's not profit, it's getting the stuff where it belongs.
How did the service change you as a man?
Okay, I hope not to offend anyone by saying this, but I believe that if a young man does not have some time spent in service, there's something lacking in their development. You can't always be with your mom and your daddy, they can't always take care of you. You're going to probably keep your nose relatively clean, but get in some trouble and learn that responsibility is yours. It's totally yours. It's a maturity thing. You mature. Hell, I was an 18-year-old kid responsible for 25 people. In the Navy, for example, it's a lot of responsibility.
you obviously met a lot of people during your time in the service. How much are you able to kind of keep up with them? And do you go to any reunions or kind of stuff like that?
You know, it's amazing. We have reunions from the Navy, and what I found most amazing is that of the three branches, you tend to meet the same people in the Air Force over and over again in different parts of the world. People I worked with in Okinawa, Japan, I met several years later at Andrews Air Force Base. People I worked with in Seoul, Korea, ended up being the plant manager at Motorola here. It was really unusual. Out of them all, occasionally with the Navy or Army, you run into a person you served with. But with the Air Force, it seemed very much more common.
Why do you think that is? Do you have any explanation for that?
Maybe because they're mobile and we are mobile to a degree, and in traveling. And what's amazing is when you meet these guys 2, 3, or even 5 years later, you still recognize them even though you're older, they recognize you. And it's like you never parted company because you still have that feeling for each other, that you took care of each other, you worked together, and you got the job done.
When you began training in the Navy, you said you were 18. What were some of the biggest kind of shocks to you, and kind of what was the early parts of training like?
The biggest shock to me was the first morning I woke up in basic training in boot camp. And there was this guy beating on the garbage can to wake us up, and the first thing I said is, my God, what did I get myself into here? I should be in bed another couple of hours, and my mommy should wake me up. But a lot of training, a lot of weapons training, a lot of navigation training, military seamanship. There's a lot of training in all the branches.
and I had to start again with just my children and my wife. I thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston and New York to LA. Well, there's pride in every American heart, and it's time we stand and say that I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA.
My first taste of American pride was when I was 12 at the grocery store with my mom. We went to the food court for dinner and noticed an elderly man with a World War II veteran's cap on. We approached him and introduced ourselves, and as I shook his hand, my heart swelled with pride. I was proud of my country. I was proud of the man whose strong hand was wrapped around mine. I was proud of the men and women who represented America by joining the armed forces. I'll never lose this pride. I will always be a patriot, a lover of the red, white, and blue, and an admirer of our veterans. Our national anthem calls America the land of the free and the home of the brave. But America can only be free if she is brave. Economics tell us that nothing is free. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Everything must be bought with a price. The same is true of freedom. Our veterans have bravely sacrificed everything to pay the price for freedom. Courageous men and women like the one I met at the grocery store are the reason America can still be free. Throughout history, in wars like Vietnam, World War II, Afghanistan, and Iraq, our love for freedom has been tested. Enemies of liberty have sought to snuff out the light. However, proud representatives of America have ventured through jungles where armed enemies lurked in the unknown, ready to strike and disappear. They've charged onto beaches under heavy machine gun and artillery fire, where they knew they probably wouldn't make it out alive. They have colored the ocean red with their blood, shed for the liberty of people they will never meet. Thanks to them, my family can go to church on Sunday. Thanks to our veterans, I have no fear of being caught praying. Thanks to our veterans, I can say what I want, when I want, and where I want. Thanks to our veterans, I am free. Veterans used to get the attention they deserve. When a man returned home from fighting on the front lines, his family and friends would throw a welcoming celebration. He was thanked many times, and his face might even appear in the newspaper. Now it seems that though we have a national holiday for them, veterans aren't appreciated, respected, or thanked. A failure to celebrate veterans is a failure to raise up the next generation. If future leaders don't understand the sacrifice necessary to maintain a free nation, no one will make that sacrifice later on down the road. We won't be able to remain the land of liberty if veterans of tomorrow don't rise up, and if we fail to instill patriotism in our young. America is only as free as she is brave. I met a veteran, and that made me want to be brave. Veterans not only protect us by fighting, they lead the next generation of patriots. Without veterans, my generation, the leaders of tomorrow, will not know what honor looks like. We will not grasp the idea of bravery. We will not have the dedication to answer the call of duty, to stand up and say, "I will go," when terrorists fly airplanes into our buildings. No one will care. No one will be brave. Freedom isn't free. This means that veterans must continue to rise up if America is to remain the great land of liberty. Currently, the United States has special operations forces in at least 134 countries around the world. Without them, the dark forces seeking to extinguish the flame of liberty will be successful. Recently, in a high school district not far from my home, students began protesting because their history textbooks were misrepresenting historical events. Veterans could stop that because they made history. They were there and they witnessed it firsthand. If we take time to listen to their stories and ask them about their lives, we can learn what really happened. We don't have to rely on hearsay to know the facts when we have the authors of history among us. These heroes deserve to be heard, and we are foolish if we don't take advantage of the opportunity. As a high school student, everything I do is motivated by the future. I plan my future, I prepare for my future, and it's easy to take my future for granted. It's easy to assume that I'll have a future. It's easy to assume I'll have an America to live in when I'm older. Reality is, though, that freedom is not free. America is only as free as she is brave. Veterans are the backbone of America. Veterans provide the truth and inspiration necessary to maintain my generation's American pride.